This is the #1 selling belt on Amazon. This is a 4-inch double prong belt. This is our belt, a 4-inch single prong, and I also brought a 3-inch belt of the same type. Reason being, most of our customers actually prefer a 3-inch over the 4-inch. 4-inch can be too wide for a lot of people, especially if you don't have enough room between the bottom of your rib cage, the top of your hips. A 4-inch can be too wide for the bottom of the squat, the setup for the deadlift, and that's why a 3-inch might be more appropriate. The reason I picked these belts for comparison is because this belt has an outer layer, it has a middle layer of leather, and it has suede on the inside. So that makes this effectively a double ply belt with suede on the inside. Both of these belts have an outer layer of leather, a middle layer, and suede on the inside. The difference is going to be what actual materials are used between these belts and the thickness. So if we look at both of these, the Amazon belt is actually about half as thick as our normal Dominion belt. If I measure this out, this guy's measuring right at 5 millimeters, and all of our double ply belts are going to be 10 millimeter. So why is that important? The reason is because what is a weightlifting belt supposed to do? It's supposed to produce a rigid ring around your core, so when you brace, you've got something to push against. The belt doesn't give. If I take this belt, because of what it's made out of and how thin it is, if I take it and just pull on it, you can see that it stretches. I can stretch it probably almost an inch just by pulling on it. If I were to take this belt, in contrast, there's no give whatsoever. Same thing for the 3-inch. And that thickness difference is the biggest thing right off the bat. As far as the hardware goes, this is a plain steel buckle, whereas ours are stainless. I've got a magnet here, so the magnet will not stick to stainless, and it will stick to the plain steel. This is important if you're worried about rusting or anything like that. The plain steel will rust and the stainless will not. The other big thing is this roller has a seam in it. So it's got a seam running all the way down. These are continuous rollers. There's no seam here. A seamed roller can actually start to open up on the ends. And what that'll do is produce a couple of sharp edges on both sides of the roller over time. And that'll start to scratch up the leather. It also just produces a sharp edge that will catch your hands and things like that. As far as the rivets, these rivets are not terrible. They're not as small as some that I've seen, but they're not the same as our structural rivets that we use. We use a two-piece rivet, basically a cap with a pop rivet. It's a very secure rivet for the leather because you've got a lot of surface area under the heads of this rivet so that it can never pull through the leather. Another thing on the buckle end is this area where the belt folds back on itself and the keeper passes through. You want to make sure that this area that's going to be touching your stomach is as flat as possible, and we cause the bulge of this to be pushed to the top side. Now, on this belt, I don't think they really thought about this, but the material is already so thin that it's not really a factor on this belt. It's not that big a deal. But I have one example that I sometimes show where if you don't pay attention to this, you can have a pretty extreme bulge on the underside of the belt. And if you're shopping around for a belt, that's one thing to look out for. Double prong versus single prong. The reason you would use two prongs is if you're worried about the prong itself cutting through from one hole to the other on the leather. On ours, we use a single prong. If you use material that's strong enough and thick enough, this is never a problem. It's also curious that they take the pin and it's actually much thinner than the pin we use. If you're trying to distribute that stress on the leather, you would want the pin to be the same size, not thinner, because you're not actually doing the job you set out to do by making the pin thinner. The double prong is a little bit harder to buckle because you've got two pins to deal with instead of the one. Bottom line is, if you have a belt that's made out of the right materials, right thickness, you're not worried about it tearing, single prong beats double prong. In terms of overall craftsmanship on this belt, it's honestly not bad. It's not bad at all. One of the things that I see immediately is like the stitching. They use a very heavy gauge thread, probably the same gauge that we use. They do that on the top and bottom. I don't see any spots where there was a thread break or something like that, and they did a sloppy job of cleaning it up. It's actually pretty good as far as the way they put it together. If you were to buy one of these, I don't think you would get it out of the box and not be able to use it. I think it'd be fine. The edges, they don't round their edges like we do. You know, again, since this material is, you know, so much thinner and so much more flexible, that's not really an issue. But we would probably take something, one of our edgers, if we were making this belt, and just run it down the length of it. Something like that. To give this a nice rounded edge, we do that on the top and bottom. But overall, in terms of build quality, given what they started with, it's honestly not that bad. All right, so the moment you've all been waiting for, we're actually going to cut into this belt and see if we can figure out what it's made of. Let's go for it. All right, I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull back some stitches, and then we'll talk about what we see. Got some stitches pulled back. I wanted to be able to peel these layers apart a little bit more, but actually it's kind of hard because if you try to peel this top layer, it just comes off in these little pieces. So this is, as I suspected, this top is not leather. It's something that you'll see a lot of times is called PU leather. It's a polyurethane. It's a synthetic material. It gets used a lot in automotive applications, and it's not real leather. It's a stretchy material. It's more decorative than it is structural. The middle part is something called split leather. Now, split leather is a specific part of the hide, literally the part that gets split off the bottom of the hide. It's the least expensive stuff. It's the least structural. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people use. Now, it looks like they've gone in and actually colored this, you know, a brown color to look like normal leather. I've got a belt here that I had cut into previously. This is usually what split leather looks like, this kind of white and fibrous stuff. So that is as I suspected. That's why this belt is as stretchy as it is. One, because it's so thin, and two, because of what it's made out of. It's got this polyurethane faux leather on top, and it's got split leather in the middle. In contrast, on our belts, we use something called top grain leather. We use two different types. So the top layer is something called skirting leather. This is what it looks like. It's a very tight grain structure. It's a structural material. There's no flaking or loose fibers or anything that's going to happen with this. These look different because this is an oiled skirting and this one is dyed. You can dye skirting. You can make it look, you know, like whatever you want. So that's the top layer, this skirting. The middle layer is something called sole leather. It's absolutely the toughest stuff you can get, even tougher a little bit than the skirting. And for our double plies, what we do is we put these two together, and then we add our layer of suede on the inside. So if you look at that, those two plies of leather plus the suede is essentially the construction of the Dominion double ply belt. One thing that might be a concern is the price difference between something like this Dominion double ply and this Amazon belt. There is a big price difference here. Why is that? So it's going to be made up of a few things. Number one, the type of material used. We talked about that. The thickness. This is half as thick as this, so literally half the amount of material. And labor costs, depending on where it's made. These are made in our shop in Florida. These guys are made overseas, so it's going to be a cheaper labor cost. So that's why there is such a price difference there. Is it worth what you're paying? As far as this belt, I don't think it's a good option for the main reason of if you brace against it, it will move out of the way. It doesn't do the one thing that a weightlifting belt should do. So let's say you are price conscious or you don't want to jump all the way up to a full Dominion double ply. I might put in a third option, and that's this. This is a single ply belt. When we talked about the layers of leather before, this is actually made of what we use for the middle layer on these belts. It's a piece of sole bend leather, just left in full thickness. It's not split down like this is. And this belt, even just by itself, if I were to measure this, this is coming in a little over 7 millimeters. So just this belt that's made out of a single strap of leather is already thicker than this entire double ply belt. This is a starting strength belt. It's basically become the gold standard for starting strength. They're used in starting strength gyms all over the US. We've sold them to D1 college gyms. These are great belts if you want something that is in between the two things that we've talked about today. So anyway, that's the comparison. If you want to check out our belts, DominionStrengthTraining.com. You can drop us an email if you got any questions. I'll put our email in the description. Give us a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.